Healthcare is, as you know, the number one budget item for the provincial government and something near and dear to all our hearts. I personally have been very, very well served by the system. The people I know closely have also been well served. However, I know that there are people who are maybe not as plugged in, because I have the advantage of having a wife who's a nurse, so understands the system. I know of stories of people who don't understand the complexities of the system, and they have definitely not had the same good access I've had. We've also been lucky that we've got a GP, and I've always had a GP. Once again, I do have a couple of friends who have not been able to get a GP. Our proposal is to have more community networks, so have a network of professionals distributed, sort of like a mini hospital, I would say. So you have doctors, nurses, but you'd also have rehabilitation therapists, osteopaths, chiropractors, a lot of what's now considered alternative care, all in one center. And a lot of these people we're looking at models where they would become government employees as well. So our proposal is to have that kind of approach, sort of a halfway between your GP's office and between a hospital, that can be distributed across the province. I've been getting a lot of emails from the paramedics, actually, when we talked about paramedics, and there seems to be this great debate going on between the firemen and paramedics who should be first responders. From my discussions with my wife at Algonquin, where they have a paramedics program, it seems to be when you have a health issue that you need to have a paramedic. The firemen are great there for support. They do lots of excellent work, but a health professional is always different from somebody who does it as the second part to their job. So in complete response to the question, relatively speaking, I have to places like Northern Ontario, I think we're very well served. From my house in cars, it's only 15 minutes to the Queensway Carleton down to 416, but I know things aren't perfect. However, I did hear of an announcement, tentative announcement from the government of a health clinic being set up in Barhaven, so that's certainly a step in the right direction. And so that is a really great model. What we really need to do is have a system where people don't have to go to emergency. So we need these health clinics, though, to be 24 hours. And there's no movement in that direction yet. We certainly need to go into that. What we're looking for in health is really a preventative-based model. We know that we can't keep growing the healthcare costs. Right now they're 42%, projected to be 50% in the near future. We would focus on health prevention to make sure you and your kids have a great health system in the future. Thank you. Well, we've actually been having issues with our well water. I live in rural Cars, and we have put in a new geothermal heat system. And what that did is it disturbed the aquifer, and our groundwater didn't need much treatment except for a bit of softening, and now we need to treat for sulfur and iron as well. We were lucky enough to have some friends who had been brought in some new chemical treatments from Europe, which work very well through the hydrogen peroxide-based system. We've put that in, and it's been terrific. So we're really lucky here, but we know that there are issues. I have a good friend, Mary Hagan, once again, who lives in Burt's Rapids, and she's been part of a committee from the city which has been looking at this issue. So I know from what she's told me is that over the last few years is the first time the city has actually started to look at what is the groundwater, what's the geology, what's the structure, what are the limits. So I just know that the research has just started, and it's an open question, and mostly we don't know. Certainly I know from Manotick that there was a great disaster in terms of what they built in the 50s and 60s, where they had basically city lots, but everybody had a well, has been proven quite the disaster. Now there's city water and sewage on the island, which it needed to be many, many years ago, and we don't want to repeat that mistake with lots of big developments out in the country. So from what I've seen, where I am, everything is fine because the houses are very far apart. However, I would guess that there are some severe limits, like there are limits to everything. And so I'm going to do a bit of a segue here, I'm afraid, about limits. So when I got interested in the Green Party because of a book I read called The Limits to Growth back in the 70s, it was a bunch of MIT professors saying, you know, there are limits to everything. We live on a finite planet, so there are limits. So right now the city is planning that 10% of the growth of the city of Ottawa will be in rural Ottawa, which is mostly out in Nepean-Carleton. And I can understand the reasons for that, but I would say before we can do that, we need some serious numbers and some serious analysis to see whether that's possible. At this time, I don't think we have the answers to that question, and unless we have the answer to that question, I would certainly err on using the precautionary principle, which is to say, if you don't know, you don't go ahead until you do know. So for me, that's an open question, so let's look at that. Slow things down a little bit, not stop, but slow down until we understand it. Now, we are very lucky with the Rideau Basin here. We've got lots and lots of water, but we need to be careful with the resource, because like everything else, it has its limits. I'm a high school teacher with learning disabled kids, and what I've learned over the years is that everybody is particularly interesting. So when I rant and rave here, beware that I know that you, the listener, are also particularly interesting, because we're all very unique. I'm a father, been married happily for almost 25 years. I have 3 daughters. The eldest just went off to university in Southern Ontario. It's been, frankly, a bit traumatic, and a big change to the household. We have a couple of dogs. We've just been going through surgery. We also have chickens. We moved to the riding because we really wanted to sort of walk the talk. The Green Party had interested me many, many years ago when I was a student at McGill, where I have a master's degree in chemical engineering from. But then I got busy with life, and when I finally got a bit older, I said, I want to do things for my kids as an example to show a great way to live. It was really based upon a book I read called Living the Good Life. A guy called Scott Nearing really was the first archetypal Bachelorlanders back in the 30s. Wrote a wonderful book called Living the Good Life. Strongly recommend it. So that book and other things inspired me. So we moved out here, and we really tried to walk the talk. We have chickens, we have turkeys, we have bees, we have garlic. It's all been great fun. We involve friends and neighbors, so it isn't something we do alone. We have several friends who participate and come out at least weekly to help us out, and we enjoy things together and eat together. We've also got into the green bit because I sort of realized that it's also about money, because in the long term, by doing green things, you save money. I started to do that because I got a little bit disturbed by the inconvenient truth, knowing that my great hero there really didn't live very green. He was flying all over the place. He had a house with lots of cars, lots of air conditioners, 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, and it sort of took away his credibility. So I started to before I became a candidate, I said, I really have to walk the talk. And so we've gone geothermal, we've got a smart car, we've got the microfit program, we're pumping electricity into the grid. So I really want to do things that will be an example for people. And these aren't something far out. I mean, my wife is a nurse teaching at Algonquin College. I'm a school teacher with an engineering background. And so we're middle-class citizens, but we're really trying our best to do things as an example to our kids and our neighbors and our friends, so that this is the kind of life that other people can live, and we can live for the next several generations. And sort of what came out of being a politician actually was really fun. Is I started a company called Carbon Hunters with a friend. A friend approached me and said, "Gord, you're such a great example, and you really have that engineering background. Let's not just talk about it. Let's do something. Let's do something to reduce the carbon footprint." So next year we're going to be working with companies to really make this real and to reduce their carbon footprint on the planet. So when you think about me and the Green Party, think about somebody who doesn't just talk about stuff, but actually does it. Hello there. I also live in rural Ottawa, in Cars, near the proposed North Gore Wind Farm. I have also attended the meetings with the North Gore Wind Action Group and totally support and understand their concerns about health. Certainly not going as far as to say all wind farms are bad or all solar farms are bad. I certainly, and the Green Party, do want to have wind and solar as a part of our energy mix, ideally up to a maximum of 30%, which has been attained in Europe. However, not at the way it's being currently done, where there is no community input and no dissent allowed. We do agree that the setback, based upon everything I've read and also from articles I've read at CBC a couple days ago, where internal documents have shown hundreds and hundreds of complaints, and also that their acoustic specialists realized that the setback probably far too close and needs to possibly go back to the Australian 2-kilometer model. We would support that kind of movement. Also, what we're looking at, and particularly with wind farms, is the idea that if somebody else is making money from a wind turbine, it's ugly. However, if I and my neighbors are getting profits from the wind turbine, suddenly it's a beautiful wind turbine. So our model is to have a community-based project. It's really a continuation of what we have now. What we've got now is Ontario Hydro is owned by us, the public. We do not have a private American model. The Greens propose really that the Green Energy Act is a movement towards privatization. We want to keep energy in the public hands. We think it's a valuable resource which the public needs to participate in. So we would propose that wind turbine project would be initiated, funded, and coordinated by a community group. They would hire the wind company, who would clearly need to make their money, but they would not be calling the shots. The community would be calling the shots. I'm sure if that approach was taken, that all the rural residents, not only in Nepean-Carleton, but across the province, would be very, very happy to share in the profits from this. Because really, if you think about it, green energy is a way for money to go back into the rural countryside. There's been this movement of money over the decades away from the rural parts into the city. This is a reverse trend. So we want the money to go back into rural residents, but the current green energy model puts that money back into the hands of large corporations, even foreign corporations, and leaves people sick and unhappy. So we would like to keep green energy. We want to keep smart meters, but we want to do it in a smart way which keeps the citizens on side. So these concerns are real. Let's deal with them, and let's listen to our good neighbors. Thank you. Hello there. I live in rural Cars. I live on a country road surrounded by farms, and certainly when I have my neighbor spread right now manure on his farm field, it creates a real country aroma, but I moved to the country, so I know that's okay. Now I recognize that biosolids are different than regular manure, but the basic principle applies. In the Green Party, we were always looking for sustainable solutions. So if you look at fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides in the long term, we're talking 50, 100 years, there are some significant problems with them. Little segue, I raise bees, and they've discovered that lots of the pesticides that have been developed recently, mostly in the U.S., have been killing the bees, this massive die-off. So pesticides and the regular approaches to things have their problems as well. So once again, just to go back to biosolids, I'm sure that when we have something new like that, there are going to be problems. And the trick is not to make a simplistic approach of saying it's good, it's bad. Let's figure out how it's good, when it's bad, what we need to be careful. I would say that the focus needs to be on what's in the biosolids, not just E. coli, but the actual details of what it is that makes it different than just spreading manure on the farm, because there certainly is a difference. I know that China's been using biosolids for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and the land is still fertile. However, the difference now is we have a lot of chemicals that are in our waste now. A lot of the pills that we take, there's all kinds of chemicals that we have from our cleaners and everything else which are sort of not naturally biodegradable. So I'd say without testing up things like estrogen or maybe household cleaners or maybe flame retardant chemicals that are getting into the biosolids, unless there's a thorough testing and analysis and case study, we really need to be very, very careful with this. However, in general, certainly the Green Party would support this kind of approach to sustainable fertilizers, but like the Green Energy Act, not a carte blanche, not in a way without real study, without really understanding the chemistry. I'm a chemical engineer by background, and I read many, many years ago a book called Our Stolen Future. There's a website still, and what they document is something called estrogen mimicry. And they've looked over the years why it is that male frogs and male fish suddenly turn into female frogs and fish, and what's happening to the sperm count. So there's a lot of research that's being done in that area, and I don't know if the bureaucrats and the scientists have looked at that particular issue with respect to biosolids. So I would say until we know better, it's better to be safe than sorry, maybe do some limited field studies, but not make it a carte blanche approach until we really understand the issue. Thank you.